Good morning, ACU. I'm so thankful for David and his leadership of chapel. I'm thankful for John and Elizabeth and Nino leading us in worship today. That was awesome. I'm thankful for Darren and the scripture and the prayer that he led us in this morning. You see, I love that scripture that Darren read. It is an incredible reminder to all of us that God did not put in us a spirit of fear. It's a reminder that we were not created to be scared and to be timid and to be shy about the things that he's put into our hearts. And yet, I don't know if you're like me, but as I've gotten older, I need that reminder more often. You see, when I was younger, I didn't really need it. When I was a kid, I was not timid. I was not scared. I was not fearful in any way. I would climb the highest tree. I would jump off cliffs into creeks. Whether there was water or not, didn't matter. I would run up and down the street. Whether there were cars or not, it didn't matter. And I think the most vivid example of the fact that I was not fearful as a kid was that I made the brilliant decision to participate in the 4th grade talent show at Wimbish Elementary. I knew that there was no way anybody could top my talent because I decided that in 4th grade I was going to get up and sing the classic Kenny Rogers song, The Gambler, a cappella. But it gets better. You see, I still wasn't afraid when the Putnam boys, that's Chris and Jason Putnam, who were in the 5th and 6th grade, older than me, came up to me and said, "Hey, Brad, what are you doing in the talent show?" And I boldly said, "I'm going to sing The Gambler. What are you guys doing?" And they smiled and said, "That's funny. We're also singing The Gambler with guitars." But it didn't matter how scary that was. I had no fear. At 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, I was willing to get up on a stage and be humiliated in front of hundreds of people. I was willing to go all out, but something changed. Something changed along the way, and I don't know if it happened before I got to college or while I was in college or the few years after college, but somewhere as I became an adult, I started being afraid. And the fear of embarrassment and the fear of failure and the fear of maybe things not going so well caused me to make decisions that kept me from fulfilling the mission of God. I don't know if that's you. I hope not. But if it is, I think the God who created the world and the God that created you has a special message for you today. And that message is, don't be led by fear. Be led by faith. You see, God didn't create this fear in us, but like so many other things that have become part of our world that God didn't create, fear has crept in. And fear keeps us from fulfilling the full mission of God. You see, if you made that decision to follow the way of Christ, if you made that decision to go down the Jesus path, it wasn't meant to be safe. It wasn't meant to be easy. In fact, in some ways, you might say it was meant to create a little bit of fear. Now, what I'm about to say here is probably a bit provocative. What I'm about to say here could get me in trouble with parents of college students, but I am one, so I'll go ahead and say it. You see, as we all grow up, as we're young, as we're kids, we learn these stories from the Bible about people who defeated giants and people who fought lions and people who built boats to go out on the ocean and people who talked to fires and stood before rulers. And we learn these stories when we're young about people who put fear aside and step boldly forward in the mission of God, but then we get older and we get a little timid. We get older and we look at our kids and say, "Oh, don't do that. Take the safe route. Take the safe job. Go to the safe place." But I don't think that's the mission of God. I think the mission of God calls every single one of us in this room to go to some places that are unsafe. I think it causes us to go to some places that would make your parents very, very scared. And yet, if we don't have people who are willing to step out and be led by faith, then God can't accomplish his mission. God can't do the things he wants to do if we're not willing to be led by faith instead of fear. You see, the organization I work with is Made in the Streets, and in Nairobi, Kenya, we work with street kids. In the city of Nairobi, there are 60,000 children under the age of 18 that live on the streets. That's 60,000 kids that don't know what they're going to eat today or tomorrow or any day for the rest of their life. That's 60,000 kids that don't know where they're going to sleep. That's 60,000 kids who are struggling every day just to survive. And many of them don't. The numbers are staggering if you look around the world and you add places like China and India and Lima, Peru, and Mexico City, and even the United States of America. There are over 100 million children under the age of 18 living on the streets around the world. And let me tell you what, they don't live in safe places. In fact, I can tell you they live in some of the most dangerous places where cars don't care if a 14-year-old is in their way. And people don't care if someone can't eat or sleep or bathe. They're in dangerous places, and yet God's calling us to go to some places like that. I don't know what your mission is particularly. I don't know what God has planned for you, but I do want to share this with you. He wants you to walk by faith, not by fear. See, I think my favorite definition of faith is this: believing in the things that are unseen. You see, if you walk by fear, then you're afraid of what you've seen. You're afraid of the pictures. You're afraid of the stories. You're afraid of the things that might happen. But when you walk by faith, you're believing in things that aren't seen. You're believing in the power of God to go before you. You're believing in the power of God to raise people from sickness, even from death. You're believing in the power of God to forgive people of their sins and to help solve the crisis like children living on the streets and clean water and disease and extreme poverty. You're believing in things that aren't yet seen when you walk by faith. So would you do it? Would you be willing to walk by faith and not by fear? Because if you are, you might get to meet some of my friends. But not if you're not willing to go. You see, you would miss out on meeting Linda. If you're too afraid to get out of your comfort zone and get on a plane and travel to parts of the world that are scary, then you might not meet Linda. Our team went out one night. Well, they're not supposed to go out at night, but they broke the rules. And they went out one night and they found Linda. Linda was sitting on a milk carton waiting for the next man to show up. I won't go into details. You can figure it out yourself. She was waiting for the next guy to show up to do the things to her that we would think are unspeakable. Our team saw Linda and they went and talked to her and they prayed with her and they told her about the good news of Jesus and they told her there was another path and they asked her, would you like to leave this carton? Would you like to leave this life? And she said yes. And the next morning, 2 of our mission specialists from the U.S. that were there went with some of our Kenyan team to meet Linda's parents and ask if it was okay for her to leave the horrible life they had put her in for survival to come join a new life. She's now in a boarding school program learning English and math and science and making plans for her future. If you are unwilling to get out of fear and walk by faith, you might not meet Sammy. Sammy was on the streets at 6 years old. 6 years old, trying to struggle every day to survive. He ended up sniffing glue and jet fuel just to feel warm at night and just to feel full in his belly when he didn't have anything to eat. Sammy's now in our literacy program in a boarding school, learning. Never went to school before. The last one I would want you to meet if you walked by faith is Beatrice. Now, Beatrice lived on the streets for about 6 years. She spent most mornings digging in the dump for scraps of plastic that she could go and sell to buy food to take home to her parents. She was invited to leave the streets, and she said yes. And so for 6 years, she's been at the Made in the Streets Vocational Training School. She graduates this December with her catering degree, and she's interviewing right now at some of the best restaurants and some of the best hotels in Nairobi, Kenya. I wish you could meet her. I tell you this because I don't want you to live in fear. I want you to walk by faith. I want you to be sent to fulfill the mission of God. So go do it. Don't sit here. Go do it. Have a great day.